Top 10 countries suffering the most from casualties in World War II. Number 10. France and Its Colonies. According to the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, the French colonial empire, which at the outbreak of the war extended to the territories of today's Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, also known as Indochina, Syria, Lebanon, or North America and Africa, lost more than 217,000 soldiers and more than 567,000 civilians. The proximity to Germany made France an important front in the war. France was one of the guarantors of the Polish security and was one of the first countries to declare war on the Third Reich. Number 9. French Indochina. Indochina was the name of the French colony that included Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. It was founded in 1887 and was under French control until the outbreak of World War II. Vichy France, a puppet government of Nazi Germany, reneged control over Indochina to the Japanese Empire in September 1940 after a few days of fighting. As the war effort tilted in the Allies' favor in 1944, Indochina reorganized itself. General war chaos, the withdrawal of the Japanese, and natural disasters led to a famine that killed between 1 million and 500,000 civilians. Number 8. Yugoslavia. It is estimated that between 1 million and as many as 1.7 million people died during hostilities and as a result of violence against civilians in Yugoslavia. Some estimates say that as many as 2/3 of those victims may have been civilians. Axis nations took control of the country in 1941. Yugoslavia was completely unprepared for the war. In Belgrade alone, more than 24,000 people died during the air raids on the 6th of April, 1941. A guerrilla movement emerged to push back against the fascists, but the guerrilla leaders were strongly divided on their visions for the future of Yugoslavia. Number 7. India. As a result of World War II, India gained independence from the British Empire. However, when Britain declared war on Hitler in September 1939, the Indian territory was still a British colony and it had to join the fight. More than 2 million Indian soldiers fought in World War II, including in the 14th Army, a British army which consisted of soldiers from multiple British colonies. The Indians have made history with their participation in battles such as Tobruk and Monte Cassino. Between 1.5 and 2.5 civilians lost their lives during World War II as a result of hunger and disease. The losses among Indian soldiers amounted to 87,000. Number 6. Japan. The Japanese Empire declared war on the United States with an unexpected attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. It's estimated that around 2,300,000 soldiers lost their lives on the front, and up to 800,000 civilians were killed. As many as 140,000 of them died when the Americans launched nuclear strikes on the sites of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and another 80,000 died as a result of radiation. This was the only case in history when an atomic bomb was used in warfare. Number 5. Dutch East India. Historians estimate that up to 4 million people have died in the Dutch East Indies, most of them as a result of disease and malnutrition during the Japanese occupation. After the capitulation of the Netherlands, Dutch East India was under the influence of the Axis nations and fell to Japan. Initially, the indigenous people of present-day Indonesia greeted the liberation from the Dutch administration with enthusiasm, but the reality of the new occupation was equally oppressive. The Indonesians were forced to work in poor conditions, and many died during the subsequent struggle for independence. Number 4. Poland. In Poland, up to 6 million people lost their lives, of which as many as 5,800,000 were victims of crimes against humanity and war crimes. These 6 million constituted 1/5 of the population of the whole country. A report prepared by the British authorities in 1947 indicated that half of the victims were Polish and half were Jewish. The extermination of the country's inhabitants, planned and carried out by Nazi authorities, took place in labor and death camps such as Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka. About 150,000 people died under the subsequent Soviet occupation. Number 3. Germany. During the war, Nazi Germany referred to itself as the Third Reich, which was intended to connect the state with the nation's history and refer to the old German regimes, the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation, and the Second Reich of the Hohenzollern dynasty. During the war, 5.5 million people lost their lives, and about 2 million were civilian victims. The The Holocaust, which consisted in mass extermination of social and national groups perceived as a threat to the Nazi goals, cost the innocent lives of 11 million people across Europe. Number 2. China. According to the New York Museum of World War II, between 3 and 4 million Chinese soldiers were killed during the conflict, and up to 20 million civilians were killed. The scale of the conflict in China is forgotten in the West, focusing only on the hardships suffered in Europe or of Americans in the Pacific. The war in China began as early as 1937 against the Japanese Empire. In 1941, China joined the war as an ally of the Allies. After the war, the state was still plagued by conflict, this time a civil war in which nationalists and communists fought for power. Number 1. The Soviet Union. Until 1941, the Soviet Union remained in an uneasy alliance with the Germans, occupying the eastern territories of Europe, until the Third Reich unexpectedly initiated a Soviet invasion. It was in the following prolonged conflict that the Soviet forces suffered enormous losses. Hitler's expansion into the USSR resulted in a very high concentration of German forces on the Eastern Front, which proved to be beyond the Germans' means and eventually led to the defeat of the Nazis in the war. Stalin's nation lost a total of 27 million citizens in the brutal conflict, between 8 million to 11 million of them in battles, 10 million victims of war crimes, and as many as 8 to 9 million who died of disease and hunger.